The start. Just then, under Nevada's ministrations, the cork came out of the bottle with a ripely plosive pop that made me jump. "Well, I want to get a look at this guy," I said, repressing the wave of anger that came from being startled. I was definitely on edge. The notion of a malevolent, cadaverous onlooker tends to do that to me, and maybe take a photo of him. Experience had taught me to err on the side of caution in these matters. Nevada looked at me with approval and smiled. "That's a good idea." At that moment, the doorbell rang and our third dinner guest arrived, a new friend of ours called Saxon Ghost. Of course, he hadn't been born with a name like that. He'd created it himself in tribute to two great record producers who had been his heroes, back when he'd been an aspiring record producer himself. Unfortunately, he'd fucked it up. He'd got one of the names wrong, but, like a bad tattoo, he owned it. Saxon Ghost was in many ways the opposite of Agatha. He was white, male, short, stout, but they shared one attribute. His scalp was as closely shaved as hers. Maybe he'd shaved it especially for us this evening. Maybe she had too. As with Tinkler, Saxon Ghost had brought some records with him in a smart canvas shoulder bag the colour of damp sand, with dark tan leather trim, purpose-built for carrying LPs, a possession which I immediately coveted, as apparently did Tinkler. "Is that your original Peter?" he said, referring to the luggage brand. "Or are you just pleased to see us?" Saxon gave this more of an indulgent chuckle than it merited. "Yeah, this model is called the Utrecht Record Hunter, I think." Tinkler already had his phone out, looking it up. "Apparently, its capacious gusset allows it to take more in than you can usually expect to fit." He was in full innuendo mode, grinning at Agatha. "I'm not even listening," she said. "It's lovely," said Nevada, who always had an eye for a stylish accessory. She glanced at me. "I think I know what I'm getting someone for his birthday." "Costs over 200 quid, said Tinkler. "Sorry to be pouring cold water, but I thought you ought to know." Nevada was indeed a little taken aback. "Well, maybe if some funds flood in." Funds in our household came from Nevada's sales of vintage fashion items, i.e. second-hand clothes, and my sales of rare vinyl. Flooding in was not what they were currently doing. "I might be able to help you with that," said Saxon Ghost. "In that case, allow me to pour you a very generous glass of a very good wine," said Nevada. Saxon chuckled, and, while Nevada poured the wine in the kitchen, he opened his record bag. The Utrecht Record Hunter had apparently not been exploited to its full capacious extent. He took out a modest handful of albums. As with the LPs Tinkler had brought, these were all Decay pressings. Unlike Tinkler, however, Saxon's selection consisted of Stravinsky with a bit of Rimsky-Korsakov thrown in for variety. Saxon Ghost didn't look like a man who listened to a lot of classical music. Indeed, his background was in producing punk rock. But nowadays, he was a devotee of French and Russian symphonists of the late 19th to mid-20th century. Whereas Tinkler had brought over a trio of albums by some 60s beat combo called the Rolling Stones. The thing about Decay was that they had pretty much invented high-fidelity sound recording, at least on this side of the Atlantic, and had routinely created audiophile landmarks of the classical repertoire. It just so happened that the Stones had also been recording for this same label at the height of their powers. What's more, there were a handful of British jazz masterpieces, like Tubby Hayes' early LPs, which had been recorded by Decay on their Tempo subsidiary in the 1950s and 1960s.